Welcome to AI Paper Podcasts. This is where we unpack the latest in AI research. And today, we're diving into something really interesting, a paper introducing xVerify. It's a new way to check answers from advanced AI models, the ones that show all their reasoning, this kind of slow thinking. Evaluating them is turning out to be, well, pretty tricky. Existing methods, they're kind of struggling with the long explanations and different ways answers show up. So xVerify comes in. Its core idea is something called strong equivalence judgment. Basically, it figures out if an AI's complicated answer means the same thing as the correct one, even if they look totally different. And get this, the results are really strong. Over 95% accuracy in tests. Even the smallest xVerify model beat most older methods. So our mission today: unpack xVerify, the challenges it solves, how it was built, and why this VAR dataset they created was so important. Ready to jump in?
Absolutely. And for our audience, AI researchers, ML engineers, this hits right at a core problem we're all grappling with. How do we actually trust the output from these super complex reasoning models? It stems from this slow thinking trend. Models like OpenAI's O1 started it, and now we see it in things like DeepSeek R1, O3 Mini. They generate all this reasoning first.
Right, they show their work, which you'd think makes checking easier, but it sounds like it's actually the opposite. Created new problems for evaluation.
Exactly. It's kind of counterintuitive. Historically, we've relied a lot on automatic evaluation. You've got sort of two main approaches: rule-based systems, and then using other LLMs as judges. Rule-based ones like LM Evil Harness or Math Verify, they're decent for standard tests. They usually just try to pull out the final answer with regular expressions.
Oh, okay, so just looking for a specific string at the end, basically.
Pretty much. And that's where they start falling down with these newer models. I mean, think about it. If one model says alpha and another uses the Greek letter A,
a simple text match fails,
Yeah.
even though it's right.
Precisely. Or in math, 100 versus the 100. Same meaning, different form. Rule-based systems often miss that. Plus, they often need really strict formatting, like perfect latex for math equations. Any little mistake, and they can break.
Okay, so they're kind of brittle, and it sounds like they completely ignore the reasoning part, all those steps the model took.
That's a huge limitation, yeah. They're laser focused on that final answer, ignoring the journey. You could have a totally flawed reasoning process that luckily stumbles onto the right answer, or a tiny error in reasoning that throws off an otherwise good process. And with these really long chains of thought, maybe with extra steps or slight detours, just grabbing the final answer feels, well, less and less reliable.
Right, makes sense. Okay, so what about the other approach, using LLMs as judges? Feels like that should be more flexible.
Yeah, in theory, it should be. Models like JudgeLM, PandaLM, Compass Judger, they can definitely be more adaptable. They're often used to gauge things like, helpfulness or how coherent a response is. But the problem is most were built for subjective evaluation, judging style, safety, that kind of thing. They haven't been quite as sharp for objective, binary, is this right or wrong decisions. Trying to map a subjective score to a simple correct and incorrect doesn't always work well. And interestingly, even the critic model specifically designed to evaluate reasoning, they've actually struggled to consistently spot errors deep inside these long, complex thought processes. So yeah, there was this really clear gap. We needed something automatic, efficient, and specifically designed for checking objective answers within detailed reasoning.
And that's where gigVerify comes in. So what's the core idea? How does it actually tackle this differently?
The core idea is pretty neat. xVerify is built as an LLM answer verifier. But instead of just looking at the end, it processes the entire output. The whole reasoning chain, the final conclusion, everything. It's designed to understand that full context to find and verify the actual final answer, wherever it might be.
Ah, okay. So a much more holistic view then. What specific features let it do that effectively? What's under the hood?
There are a few key things. First, it's robust equivalence checking. This is really central. It means it can recognize when different symbols or words mean the same thing, like your alpha and IR example. Or it can match mathematical expressions that look different but are, mathematically identical, like xy plus z versus x plus xc. It also has semantic understanding for natural language answers, so it gets meaning beyond just word matching.
That equivalence part sounds absolutely critical, not just text matching.
Exactly. Another big one is tolerance for formatting errors. It can handle slightly messy latex in math problems, which, let's be honest, LLMs often produce. And finally, it's versatile. Designed to work across different objective tasks, multiple choice, math, short answer, even classification questions.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned they created a new data set, VAR, to train and test this. Why couldn't they just use existing benchmarks? There are tons out there.
That's a really good point. They found that existing datasets just weren't quite right for this specific challenge. Many were built before these slow-thinking models, with their super long outputs, became common. And like we discussed, other judge models and datasets were often focused on subjective qualities, not zeroing in on the correctness of an answer hidden in a long reasoning trace. So to really train Verify to handle these kinds of outputs and to test it properly, they needed data that reflected this new reality.
Got it. So how did they actually build VAR? Sounds like a massive project in itself.
Oh, it definitely was. They generated a huge number of question-answer pairs, about 191,600, I think. They used 19 different LLMs, a mix of popular ones, and tested them on 24 different reasoning benchmarks. And these weren't simple benchmarks. They included tough ones known for needing complex reasoning, things like GPQA, Live Math Bench, even recent ones like AIM 2024, and the classic math dataset. And critically, they made sure the data included those really long step-by-step answers.
Wow, 191,000 samples. That's all. How did they manage all that data? How was it structured?
They grouped the 24 benchmarks into 4 main types: multiple choice, math, short answer, and classification, just based on the question format. This helped make sure xVerify would be trained and tested across a good range of objective problems. They also used different prompting techniques to get the LLM responses: zero shot, few shot, asking for chain of thought, not asking for it, sometimes specifying the answer format, sometimes leaving it open.
So lots of variety of the prompts to get diverse outputs.
Exactly, to really mimic the real world.
Okay, so they have this mountain of LLM responses. The next big challenge must have been labeling them, figuring out if each one was actually correct or not. How did they ensure accuracy there? That seems crucial.
Absolutely crucial. And they took a pretty rigorous multi-stage approach. First, they used GPT-4o, a powerful model itself, to do an initial round of labeling. They actually used 2 different prompts with GPT-4o to kind of cross-check the results.
Using AI to label AI data, okay.
Yeah, but they knew even GPT-4o isn't perfect. So they had human reviewers focus specifically on the really hard math problems, and also on any cases where the 2 GPT-4o prompts disagreed on the label. And for the data they used for final testing, the test and generalization sets, they went even further. Every single sample in those sets was manually annotated by humans. So effectively a 3-round process to really nail down the accuracy.
Wow, okay. That's some serious dedication to label quality. And I think the paper mentioned data augmentation too, making the data set even tougher.
Yes, they did. They used some clever tricks to make VAR more diverse and robust, basically preparing xVerify for weird edge cases. For multiple choice, they'd swap option labels like change A, B, C to 1, 2, 3 or IT3. They even added or removed wrong answer choices to introduce noise.
Trying to trip it up intentionally.
Sort of, yeah. Or at least make sure it wasn't relying on superficial patterns. For math problems, they generated mathematically equivalent expressions. So if the right answer was 2 plus 2, they might also generate 4 or 1 plus 3 as equivalents, both for the reference answer and the LLM's output, teaching Verify that different forms can be the same.
That equivalence training again.
Exactly. And for the final answer sentences themselves, across all types, they applied over 1,000 different transformation patterns, rephrasing things, adding different symbols or delimiters around the answer, just creating tons of variety in how the final answer might look.
Okay, so they really put this VAR data set through its paces before even training Verify. So the moment of truth. How did Verify actually perform when they tested it?
Right, the experiments. They evaluated it on the VAR test and generalization sets using standard metrics accuracy and F1 score, and they compared it against, well, pretty much everything relevant. Existing evaluation frameworks like DeepSeek Math, LM Evil Harness, OpenCompass, and also against LLM judge models like PandaLM, Prometheus 2, Compass Judger, and even GPT-4o itself, both with and without chain of thought.
A pretty comprehensive comparison. What did the results show on the main test set?
The results were really striking. The xVerify models consistently came out on top. They outperformed all the existing frameworks and all the other judge models, including GPT-4o. In nearly every category, the top 2 scores belonged to xVerify models.
Okay, wow. What about those frameworks? How far behind were they?
The best frameworks like DeepSeek Math, Verify, and OpenCompass, they kind of topped out around 80% F1 accuracy. And remember, some couldn't even handle all question types. They really struggled with the long reasoning outputs, as we suspected.
And the other LLM judges? How did they fare?
GPT-4o and Compass Judger were the strongest competitors there. But even the big Compass Judger 132B model showed some weakness, particularly on math questions. The smaller Compass Judger models did significantly worse. And here's a really interesting bit. Even the smallest AxVerify model they tested, the 0.5 billion parameter one, actually outperformed that large Compass Judger 132B model overall.
Okay, that's interesting. Shows efficiency. How close was GPT-4's performance?
GPT-4 did quite well. Its performance was often close to the AxVerify models. But using chain of thought prompting with GPT-4o, while sometimes giving a tiny boost, nearly doubled the number of tokens used, which means double the cost and time. In contrast, that small AxVerify 0.5b model beat almost everything except GPT-4o with chain of thought, and the AxVerify 3bi model beat even that expensive GPT-4o run.
So better performance, potentially much cheaper.
Exactly. And on those tough math questions, the larger AxVerify models were hitting over 95% accuracy and F1. They also saw performance generally improve as AxVerify got bigger, up to the 7B model they tested.
That's very convincing on the test set. But the real acid test is generalization, right? How did it do on data it hadn't explicitly seen during fine-tuning?
Right, the generalization set. They did see a small dip in AxVerify's performance, as you'd expect, but it was really minimal, less than 1.5% drop in accuracy in F1. The other methods, their results were more mixed on the generalization set, but crucially, AxVerify still outperformed all the baselines, even on this new data. Shows pretty strong generalization, even if there's a tiny bit of overfitting.
And the other method's struggles continued.
Yeah, the frameworks mostly stayed below 80%, and most of the judge models, apart from GPT-4o, really struggled with the math questions in the generalization set. It highlighted how tough that subset is. And interestingly, for GPT-4o, using chain of thought didn't really help and might have even hurt slightly on the generalization set.
So the extra cost didn't even pay off there.
Seems not. Meanwhile, that smallest AxVerify 0.5b model still beat everyone except GPT-4o, and the AxVerify 3bi beat both GPT-4o versions again. The larger Verify models kept their math performance above 90% even on the generalization set, and they noticed the drop in performance got smaller as the AxVerify model size increased, suggesting bigger models generalize even better.
So higher accuracy, strong generalization.
Right.
That's a winning combo. You also touched on efficiency and cost earlier. Did they quantify that?
They did. They included analysis in the appendix showing that the AxVerify models were significantly more computationally efficient and cheaper to run compared to the other LLM judge models, especially GPT-4o.
Which is a huge deal for practical use, right? If you need to evaluate thousands of outputs.
Absolutely. Faster and cheaper makes it much more feasible to deploy at scale.
Okay, so wrapping this up, AxVerify really looks like a significant step forward. It's providing a more accurate, more generalizable, and more efficient way to evaluate these complex reasoning outputs from advanced AI on objective questions. And that VAR dataset they built sounds like it was absolutely instrumental in making this possible.
Exactly. I think the key takeaway is that AxVerify offers a targeted, effective solution for a major bottleneck in AI development right now. Its ability to outperform existing methods, even the smaller AxVerify models showing such strong results, is really promising for reliably assessing these powerful AI systems.
It really is. It makes you think, doesn't it? As these reasoning models get even more sophisticated and we develop evaluation tools like AxVerify, what's next? How do we continue to ensure we can actually trust the knowledge AI generates, the problems it solves? How will tools like AxVerify shape how we build and deploy AI going forward? Definitely some food for thought there. For listeners who want to dig into the paper and the dataset themselves, we'll definitely put the links in the show notes. Thanks for joining us on this AI Paper Podcast deep dive into AxVerify.